Some weeks the news just feels all over the place, right? It's like one minute you're hearing about a military move in South America, and the next, someone's talking about buying Greenland, and then bam, a huge policy change on housing right here at home. It's enough to give you whiplash. Well, this week, we're going to try and connect those dots. Believe it or not, there might be a hidden logic behind all that chaos.
And really, this one quote kind of sums up the entire week's vibe. The message? It didn't matter if it was for other countries or for our own markets. It was basically, forget the easy way. Forget talking it out. The approach was simple. We're going to do it the hard way. And wow, did that send some shockwaves.
Okay, so here's the game plan for how we're going to untangle all this. We'll kick things off with that power play for oil in Venezuela. Then we're jumping way up north to that wild proposal about Greenland. After that, we'll swing back home to see what's up with the housing market and why the defense industry is so confused. And it's all leading to one big question. Are we looking at a totally new playbook for how the world works?
All right, let's start with those international bombshells. And the first one was a big one. A surprise military operation in Venezuela that ended with the capture of its leader, Nicolas Maduro. The fallout from that? It was immediate.
So the very first thing that happened was, well, it was all about the oil. We're talking about gaining control over Venezuela's absolutely massive oil reserves. And it happened fast. Like within hours, top oil execs were already being called to the White House to figure out who was going to manage all these new assets.
But, this idea of we own it so it's ours, it didn't stop in South America, not by a long shot. It led to probably the most shocking proposal of the week, and this time it was about Greenland. The thinking behind it is, it's brutally simple, right? When we own it, we defend it. You don't defend leases the same way. So we're not just talking about renting a spot for a military base anymore. This was about straight up buying the place.
So what's the logic here? Well, officially, it was about strategy. The goal was to push back against Russia and China, who were getting more and more active up in the Arctic. And okay, that's a real concern. But experts immediately started raising their hands saying, hold on a second, you can't just buy another country. And the roadblocks aren't just about international politics, they're literally built into our own system.
And this really shows you just how hard that would be. Think about the Louisiana Purchase. That wasn't just some quick deal. It needed a formal treaty, and it had to get votes in both the House and the Senate. And today, with members of the president's own party saying, no way, this hard way looks, it looks pretty much impossible.
Okay, so this whole do it the hard way thing wasn't just for what's happening overseas. Nope. Right back here at home, some big policy announcements were creating just as much chaos. Let's start with the housing market. So everyone knows housing is crazy expensive. To try and tackle that, a new plan was put out there, basically to ban huge investment firms, think companies like Blackstone, from buying up single-family homes and turning them into rentals.
But here's the thing. When you actually dig into the numbers, the whole plan starts to look, less like a real solution and more like something to grab headlines. A study from Brookings found that these giant investors, they only control about 3% of all single-family rentals. Just 3%. Which kind of makes you wonder, right? Was this really about fixing the housing market, or was it about winning votes?
And if you think that was confusing, the defense industry had it even worse. Get this. In just 15 minutes, they got two messages that were polar opposites. First, an order comes down that basically punishes them by banning stock buybacks. Then, just minutes later, a proposal to give them a massive budget increase. You can just imagine investors tearing their hair out trying to figure out what the actual policy was supposed to be.
So, okay, after all that whiplash, you're probably thinking, what in the world am I supposed to do with my money, right? If you're an investor, how do you navigate this kind of chaos? Well, the experts we looked at say the key isn't to just react to everything. It's about asking the right questions.
So the big takeaway here isn't to freak out over every single headline. Instead, you got to ask those deeper questions, like does this military action have an actual exit strategy? Are there strings attached to this new policy? And maybe the most important question of all, is your portfolio built to handle these kinds of shocks, or is it too focused on just one thing?
And looking beyond the day-to-day chaos, analyst Ian Bremmer points out something really critical for the long term. It's like a tale of two completely different energy strategies. On one hand, you have the US going all in on oil and gas. On the other, you've got China, who is just aggressively building out the entire global supply chain for wind, solar, and batteries. They are making two totally different bets on where the future of energy is headed.
And all of this, it brings us to the biggest question of all. Are these just a bunch of random, chaotic events? Or are we actually watching a fundamental change in how the world works?
Well, the theory that's starting to emerge is that this isn't just some temporary storm that we can wait out. Some analysts are actually calling this a post-disruption society. The idea is that the kind of chaos we've been talking about, that's not the exception anymore. That is the new normal.
Bremer actually takes it a step further. He calls this moment a political revolution. His argument is that the president isn't just a symptom of our institutions getting weaker, but is acting as an accelerant, actively and intentionally trying to break down the traditional rules and the checks and balances that are supposed to limit executive power.
But, and this is a huge but, Bremer thinks this revolution is actually going to fail. And not just because of things like the courts pushing back. No, he argues the biggest thing stopping it is the leader's own lack of discipline. That tendency to get distracted by shiny objects, like, say, buying Greenland, instead of staying focused on the goal.
So, after a week that gave us all whiplash, maybe the biggest takeaway is this: stability, as we knew it, might be off the table. The old rulebooks are being ripped up. And that leaves us with one last, really big question for everyone, for investors, for world leaders, for all of us. If being unpredictable is the new playbook, how do you win a game when the rules are always changing?